Billionaire froze when the new janitor walked in. She had no idea who she was cleaning for. Before we begin the story, don't forget to subscribe and follow Tender Bonds. Like and share our story. The pipe went first. That was how the night began. Not with her, but with the sound of water where water had no business being, a low metallic groan from the bathroom down the corridor. Then the smell, mineral and cold, old iron releasing. Sela's cutter was on the phone with the fund manager in Columbus when he heard it. A quarterly call he'd been dreading since December. Numbers that required him to speak around the word restructuring, until it meant something other than what it meant. He said into the phone, "I'll have to call you back," and hung up before the man could respond. He was already in the corridor when she came around the corner with the mop. She was moving fast, cart ahead of her, a contractor bag tucked under her arm. Green uniform, sleeves rolled despite the building running cold, and she had the particular forward lean of someone who has already assessed a situation and is 3 steps past waiting for permission. She registered him in the hallway and did not slow down. "Bathroom," she said, already past him. "Supply line. You'll want the main shutoff end of the east corridor utility closet." He stood there. He had been the owner of this building for 3 years, and he had not once thought about where the main shutoff for the 42nd floor was, and she had told him without breaking stride. And the ease of it, the sheer casual authority of it, stopped him the way very few things stopped him anymore. She glanced back. "You still here?" He went to find the valve. The utility closet was dark. The light switch had been failing for 2 months. Another item in a maintenance log that had grown long during Silas's tenure in the way that lists grow when a man is good at seeing problems and poor at believing they concern him directly. He found the valve by feel, turned it the wrong way first, corrected, and listened to the sound from the bathroom diminish. When he came back, she was already managing the water, maybe an inch deep in the low corner where the tile had settled, and she was working it toward the drain with a practiced efficiency that excluded commentary on who had or hadn't been watching the supply line. The mop moved in long, clean arcs. The contractor bag was open against the wall, soaking the overflow. "I've got this," she said. "I know," he said. He didn't leave. She looked at him then with the expression you use on someone who is in your way but technically outranks you. "There's a reason you're standing there." He said, "The toolbox. I think there's one in the utility closet." She straightened. Something shifted in her face, not exactly interest, more like recalibration. "What kind?" "Craftsman red. Basin wrench." He didn't know what that was. She saw that he didn't know what that was. "Get it," she said. "I'll show you." The toolbox was behind the cleaning supplies, shoved against the back wall of the utility closet where it had sat since November, and when Silas pulled it into the corridor light, he felt the weight of it the way you feel the weight of something you've been trying not to pick up. Red Craftsman, original from maybe 1987, hasp rusted a deep orange where the clasp met the steel. He'd moved it here from under the office window when he'd first come back, had put it behind the chefflerie and then behind the cleaning supplies, and had not thought about it again for 4 months. That was the lie he told himself. He'd thought about it every week. He carried it to the bathroom. Cass had the undersink cabinet open, flashlight from her cart propped against the trap, and she took the toolbox from him without ceremony and flipped the latches and opened it. She was still for a moment, just a moment, looking at the way it was organized. Socket sets in ascending order, pliers on a pegboard insert, labels in neat handwriting on strips of tape, basin supply, joint tape, compression. "This isn't yours," she said. It wasn't a question. "No," he said. She found the basin wrench in the 4th drawer, labeled exactly where it needed to be. She handed it to him, handle first. "You're going to go up under there," she said. "Left hand on the trap for stability. The wrench head reverses, clockwise tightens, counter loosens. There's a collar on the shaft. Feel for the supply nut first before you do anything." I've never "I know," she said. "You'll be fine." He got on the floor. He found the trap with his left hand and the nut with his right, and he put the wrench on it and tightened it the wrong direction, and she said other way without inflection, and he tightened it the right way, and it held. He lay on the bathroom floor for a moment with the basin wrench in his hand and the mineral smell of the old pipes around him. And above him the flashlight beam caught the underside of the cabinet, the layers of it. Fresh caulk over old caulk over a gap that had been there for years. Someone had been here before him, patching, maintaining. The grout on the floor tile near the base of the cabinet was redone in a slightly off-white, just visible if you knew to look. He knew that grout. He'd watched it being laid sometime in the late 90s. He'd been maybe 12. Dale, he thought, Dale did that. He got up. Dale Prentice had been his father's operations manager since before Silas was born, had been, without either of them choosing it, the most constant presence of Silas's childhood. Not a father. His father had been present in the way of men who are present in theory, who sign checks and attend recitals and are nonetheless profoundly elsewhere. Dale had been the man who showed up. When Silas was 9 and had broken the back axle of his bicycle jumping the drainage ditch, it had been Dale who arrived on a Saturday with a 12mm socket and no commentary. When Silas was 16 and the car he'd borrowed without asking threw a rod on Route 30, it had been Dale's number he'd called. Silas had left at 22 and not come back for 17 years. Columbus, then a fund in New York that made him more money than he could spend and kept him busy in the way that money and busy are sometimes the same thing. Then Dale's voice on the phone, doing what it did when he was trying not to ask something directly. "They're talking about selling it, see. Your dad's health. You know how it is." He'd come back. His father died 7 months later. Dale died 14 months after that. Now it was February, and Silas was in the bathroom of the 42nd floor with a basin wrench he didn't own, and Cass Drennan was rinsing the mop in the janitor's sink with the same matter-of-fact efficiency she brought to everything, and the toolbox was open on the floor between them. "Whose was it?" she said. She'd seen him looking at it. "Man named Dale Prentice," Silas said. "He ran this building for 40 years. She nodded, the kind of nod that isn't an invitation but isn't a door closing either. "He kept it organized like that," Silas said. "He knew where everything was. I used to think it was obsessive." She looked at the open drawers. "It's not obsessive," she said. "It's just knowing what you need." Her name was Cass Drennan. He'd learned it 3 weeks earlier the way you learn things in office buildings, by overhearing it. The security guard on the first floor calling her by name as she pushed through the door with her cart, her response a flat night, Mel that suggested she gave nothing she hadn't already budgeted. She worked the commercial route, the Cutter building on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 others on alternating nights. She moved like someone who had learned that efficiency was not a gift, but a form of self-defense. She was not from Canton. South of Columbus, he thought, some flatness in the vowels. She had a 9-year-old daughter named Harper who stayed with her grandmother in Akron on the nights Cass worked, mentioned once in passing with the matter-of-factness of someone stating a fact they've made their peace with. What he hadn't known, until the night of the pipe, was that she knew the building better than he did. She knew the bathroom tile dates, that grout's late 90s, somebody did a good job, and she knew the HVAC cycle, knew which windows on the east face leaked cold air when the wind came from the northwest. She knew the elevator on the left ran a half-second slow. She knew the light in the utility closet had been out for 2 months before he mentioned it, because she'd been working around it for 2 months, and when he said he'd put in a work order, she said, "I've put in 3. He called maintenance the next morning. The light was fixed by noon. She noticed, he could tell by the way she didn't say anything about it, which was how she acknowledged things that mattered. After the pipe, they talked, not in any dramatic rearrangement of who they were to each other, nothing that sudden. It was more like a gradual declension of distance, the way a room temperature changes when someone opens a door. He stayed later on Tuesdays. She didn't tell him he was in her way anymore, though occasionally she moved around him with a pointed deliberateness that communicated the same thing more efficiently. The friction was there. She wasn't easy. She disagreed with him in her oblique way more than anyone on the 42nd floor dared to. One night in early March, when he mentioned the December layoffs in passing 10% of staff, a figure he'd presented to himself as mathematical necessity, she was quiet for long enough that he heard it. "What?" he said. "Nothing." "That wasn't nothing." She set the squeegee down. "Deb Mora," she said. "Second floor, accounts receivable. She's been here 19 years. She's got a kid at Timken High with a scholarship application in. That's one person." She picked the squeegee back up. "I'm just saying, restructuring's a number until you know the names." He didn't answer. He sat with it, and it stayed with him the way an honest thing stays. And 2 weeks later he called Deb Mora's direct line himself. Not about her job. That was done. It was done. But about whether the building's partnership with Stark State College offered retraining credits she could use. And she'd been so startled to hear his voice that she'd gone silent for a moment before saying yes. Actually, she'd heard about it. He hadn't told Cass. He hadn't needed to. The next Tuesday she came in with 2 cups of gas station coffee and set one on the corner of his desk without a word. He didn't comment on the coffee. She didn't comment on the coffee. He drank it. What Silas understood by March was something he couldn't have said directly because it arrived without language. That he had spent 3 years managing the Cutter building as though it were a problem he was qualified to solve. The way you solve a quarterly report or a fund allocation. And Dale had spent 40 years living inside it the way you live inside something you love without calling it love. Dale had known the grout dates and the elevator timing and the names of Deb Mora's children. He had fixed the tile and recaulked the pipe and put the basin wrench in the 4th drawer and labeled it. And he had done all of this without needing Silas to see it or thank him for it. And Silas had gone to New York and made a fortune and come back and sat behind Dale's desk and moved Dale's toolbox to the closet so it would be out of the way. He thought about this during the long Canton nights, the sky outside sealing the city in its familiar pewter. He thought about what Dale had said in the hospital room. "You were always going to be fine, see. That was never what I was worried about." He'd taken that as reassurance. He was no longer sure it was. The night Cass mentioned Joni Vreeland, they were in the parking garage. He'd started walking her to her car, not as a thing he'd decided, just something that had evolved some evenings when she was leaving and he was leaving and the elevator was going down anyway. The garage at night had its own particular atmosphere. Concrete cold, the smell of oil and exhaust, orange light from the overhead banks that turned everything slightly amber. Her Civic was on the 1st level, both headlights even now. The left rear had been crooked for weeks from some old impact, and then one morning in late March it was straight again. He hadn't asked. She said it offhandedly, the way you mention someone in passing when you've assumed they mean nothing to the other person. "Joni Vreeland from the Massillon building. We did the same certification course in the fall. She's a pistol." Silas stopped walking. "Dale Prentice's Joni." Something moved across Cass's face. "She talked about him," she said after a moment. "When she found out where I was working, she talked about him quite a bit actually." "What did she say?" They were standing near Cass's car, the orange light overhead making the parking structure feel like a theater after the show has ended, all the energy gone somewhere else. She said he was the kind of man who would rather fix a thing than say anything about it. Cass looked at her keys. She said she understood that for a long time, then she stopped understanding it. Silas thought about the toolbox under the window. Dale putting it there behind the dyeing plant, where it was close but not in the way. A man who kept his tools organized so everything was findable, who labeled each drawer in handwriting that hadn't changed in 40 years, who had spent a long life maintaining things for other people, and had not, in the end, been able to maintain the one that mattered most to him. He never told me he was sick until there was no time left, Silas said. I would have come sooner. I know, Cass said. He knew that too. She said it gently, which was unusual enough that he looked at her directly. The amber light caught the side of her face. That's probably why, she said. He stood with that for a long time after she drove away. The school play was on a Thursday, the last week of March. He didn't know about it until he saw her face. She came in at 8:15 instead of 7:45, and her jaw was set in the way it got when she was managing something she didn't intend to show. She went straight to the windows. He watched her for a moment and then watched his screen and then put the screen down. Did something happen? Harper had a play tonight. She didn't stop moving. Second grade. I had the Brewster building first, flooding in the parking structure. I didn't get out until 7:30. He said nothing. I made it to the lobby, she said. They were doing curtain call. She paused. The squeegee made its slow pass across the glass. She said she saw me come in. She said she saw me. He was very still. What he understood in that moment arrived not as a thought but as a physical thing, the way cold arrives complete and without preamble. He thought about Dale, and then about what Dale had actually given him, which was not the phone calls or the building systems or the tour of the shut-off valves. It was this, the knowledge for 30 years that when something went wrong, someone was already in motion. That someone would show up. He had built his entire adult life on that knowledge, and had never once looked directly at it. The way you don't look directly at the thing that's holding you up, because looking would remind you that you need it. He thought about Cass in a school lobby in Akron watching curtain call. He thought about Harper looking out from a stage and telling herself a story about what she saw. He thought she's doing it alone, the whole weight of it alone. And then from somewhere he hadn't gone in a long time, so was I. I have a company box, he said. Indians, 20-some games this season. He stopped. The words were clumsy and he knew they were clumsy. Harper might like baseball. Cass looked at him. She watches it with her grandfather, she said. Okay, he nodded at the desk. Just if she wanted, if you wanted. A pause. Cass turned back to the window. I'll ask her, she said. April came with the smell of thaw in the parking structure, old concrete and something green underneath. Insistent, the smell of things that had been patient all winter. The sky over Canton broke open in increments, not dramatically, the gray lightening by degrees until there were actual afternoons where the light had color in it. He started leaving at 8:45 instead of 9. He was aware of what that was. He would say good night in the corridor, ride the elevator down, walk to the car. Sometimes he sat for a minute before starting it. He was not a man who had previously sat in parking garages not starting his car, and he was aware of what that was also. On a Thursday in the second week of April, he rode the elevator down and stood in the lobby and went back up. She heard him come out of the elevator. She was at the far window, the cart beside her, the city lights gathered in the glass below. Forget something, she said. I wanted to ask you something. He said it before he'd finished deciding to. She waited. She was good at waiting, not the waiting of someone killing time, but the waiting of someone who has decided you're worth the patience. About the Indians game, he said. April 22nd, opening home series. There's room in the box, I meant to say. I'd want you both there. You and Harper, not just I mean it wouldn't be, he stopped. He was 51 years old and he sounded like he was 16. I'd want company, he said, is what I mean. The city lights held in the glass. Canton below them, the yellow-orange grid of a place that had not become what it intended and had become something else instead. Grid extending to where the dark fields began, and the suburbs thinned and the valley opened up, and there was just Ohio, just the old glacial plain going on and on under the spring stars. Okay, Cass said. Okay, he said. Neither of them said anything else. She went back to the window. He went to his desk and turned his screen off and sat in the dark for a while with the city below him, and it did not feel like the kind of dark it had been in November. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday morning in early May, sky that specific blue that Canton only produced in the gap between winter and humidity, trees along the Cuyahoga having finally decided to be green. Sila's cutter carried the craftsman toolbox down to his car. Not to throw it away. He drove to the hardware store and bought new drawer liner, the ridged kind that kept things from sliding. He bought a new lock for the hasp, the same practical style Dale would have used, nothing fancy. At the register he bought a pocket notebook, the same kind Dale had kept in the toolbox's top tray for part lists and measurements, and he put it in the top tray when he got home. He drove to the garage. He lined each drawer. He returned everything to Dale's order, socket sets ascending, pliers on the pegboard, the basin wrench in the fourth drawer. He wrote on the label strip in his own handwriting. It looked different from Dale's. That was all right. On the workbench beside the toolbox he set 2 Indians tickets, the paper kind, printed off the box office confirmation email that morning. Section 133, Row C, the third base side where you could see the whole field and the lake beyond it on clear days. He'd bought a third for himself without quite deciding to, and it lay there with the others. He left the toolbox open. The hasp was still orange with old rust. That wasn't changing. But the drawers were straight and the liner was down, and the light through the open garage door was the particular low-angled light of Ohio in May, lying warm across the concrete floor, finding the red paint of the old box and making it glow like it meant something. He went inside to make coffee. The garage door stayed open.